So we got a new album coming out in a couple of weeks, Racket, Throwing Muses. First Throwing Muses album in about 7 years, if I'm not mistaken. So, and of course, you've done lots of stuff in between that time. So how do you determine when it's time to do Throwing?
That. People keep asking what I was doing sitting in my house for 7 years.
Oh, man, that's crazy.
I don't even have a house. I've been gone the whole time. But we also, one thing that, I mean, you can, if you care about other aspects of my career, you can look it up. I've been on book tours and stuff like that. But all of my entities continue to play even when there's no attention as part of the equation. And obviously, when it comes to music versus the music business, music is prayer and they are televangelism. And so when you straddle those two worlds, you tend not to engage so much with the attention. Music is an ongoing phenomenon. And if you treat it as such, you're going to spend a lot of time being as focused as a musician needs to be.
Right.
And that means we play a lot of music that has nothing to do with anyone hearing it or releasing it or recording it or stopping it in any way. It continues to be a fluid thing. Whereas performers are the opposite. Right. Performers, entertainers, people who are truly in that televangelism world, in the music, well, the recording industry, they are only about the attention. So they're continually thinking, will this play well?
Right.
Which is a very different mindset. And I can sound judgmental because that's not mine, but I think there's a giving nature that is often a part of that. We see a lot of the selfish tap dancey show people who want the spotlight, but some people are just truly kind of theatrical and wanting to share this warmth and create a group high. So I've been humbled in my judgment of that aspect of some of these people who call themselves musicians, and I would say, you're not a musician, you're doing something else. But I do think it is occasionally valid.
Right. You're an entertainer.
Yeah. And if I hadn't met Betty Hutton, do you know who that is?
Yeah.
She's an old movie star. Like,
yep.
She was like Judy Garland back in her day. And she was my best friend in college because I started college when I was 15 and she started college when she was 65. So neither of us had
So you had a lot in common.
What's that?
So you had a lot in common.
Anyway. And we didn't have any friends. Nobody would talk to either of us because I was too young and she was too old. And she also thought that I was in what she called showbiz.
Right.
And I had started my band the year before I started college when we were all 14. And because most of us were girls, we could get into clubs because we don't start fights. So we could open for all these great bands and just be a part of like hardcore nights with 25 bands. And Betty would come with her priest and give me showbiz advice.
Nice. Well,
and if I hadn't had that spin, I would have thought, you losers, shut up. But she had this different old Hollywood take on entertainment and heart, I suppose. And so I look for that in people who show off, and I try to find it. I like being humbled. I like being wrong, and I like seeing human nature as a nice thing.
Right. Well, hopefully everyone else will start thinking that soon again. I don't know.
I know, yeah.
Oh man, but I can't believe you went to college when you were 15.
I was a nerd.
Okay, that's good enough for me.
I'm actually still a nerd.
Oh man, that's fantastic. So, Racket. So, what was the motivation behind getting Throwing Muses back together and doing another album? Was there something that told you it was time to do it, or is it just a natural progression?
It's always the songs. I don't control the songs any more than I control my kids. So I, pour their cereal and put on their little T-shirts and wait for them to tell me how to raise them. And that's honestly my only skill, not telling them what to say. So when I first step foot in the studio, on the first day of every session, I know exactly what mic I'm going to use on the kick drum and where it's going to be and what amps I want to use and how long I want to leave them on the night before and what reverbs I'm not going to use. I know everything, start to finish. I have notebooks full, and I'm always completely wrong. Like, have you ever heard a record before wrong? And if I'm not, then I'm going to know this is, I need to step back. This is not a cool session. I gotta listen. And I don't think the ideas are bad. They're fruitful even, but they are not in charge. It's like putting style before substance. You won't have substantive style in the end. So the Muses, while we were ongoing, it was not material that was publishable. And I'm not even sure what that means. It doesn't lack for quality or authenticity or even engagement. It's just more personal, quieter. It's not easily adoptable as someone else's soundtrack. It's more an engagement between the three of us.
Right.
And to practice that circular breathing, like when actual musicians play together, their heartbeats line up. And it doesn't happen with a fake musician. It doesn't happen with a show off or somebody who just took piano lessons or is holding a guitar because it looks cool. But real musicians, your heartbeats have to line up, and that's what we're practicing. And so 7 years can go by with other tours and projects and books and things, and none of the songs are for other people's soundtracks. So it would be almost an insult to release them. But these songs were. I mean, also 7 years ago, we put out a record with like 35 songs on it or something.
Right.
It's like already overstaying your welcome at that point.
It takes a long time to let the dust settle, huh?
Yeah, it was, it just wasn't finished playing out yet, that record. Right. It took a while for people to get, I mean, we did a world tour that was like 2 years long. So, that's the chunk of the 7 cut off, and then
that's true.
Solo tours and stuff. But it was still playing out. It was an odd, intricate, shattered record that took a bit to, I think there was one single that you could actually call a single. It was more about jumping into a tornado, and it just takes a while for that to spin out.
Yeah. So I guess the inevitable question is, you described the previous record as what you just did. How would you describe this record compared to that? Is there a similar mindset, or are you somewhere else completely 7 years later?
I mean, you might know better than I. Have you heard it?
I have. And I mean, there's things on it that are like very noisy and it explodes, and then there are some mellower moments, and very kind of dreamlike in parts of it, I think. So
yeah, actually, that does sound like Purgatory Paradise, but this has two completely different sonic vocabularies, and only two. I'm used to having about 5. And juggling them and sequencing them and working with it's like you always want one sound to be your Venn diagram between all the material, and that I know how to do, but this one just wanted to be really heavy, distorted, even boring. I'm going to say hypnotic, which is the nice version of boring, but just rolling and rolling and rolling. And then the other one was this weird little intricate music box with sound effects, but actual analog sound effects, but not instruments per se. And I didn't know how to put them together until I realized I didn't have to. They just went together. But it was a surprise of a record. I don't really know how to treat either one of these kinds of songs, but that's so refreshing. I leave it up to the Muses to just confuse the Muses.
Yeah, because the first song is called Dark Blue, and it's got this like clangy guitar intro in it, and there's a line about violated carnations, and it is like, whoa.
Everything. I was just I'm gonna take your picture now. Hope that doesn't make you cry. Because Freddy doesn't believe that I made it work. Yeah, I had this little blue table in the kitchen here on this island where my kids and I were convening after just a life collapse. We all pulled together on the island almost in a wartime fashion, literally having to find wood in the street to burn for heat and stuff, and taking one boy out of the hospital and bringing him back to life. And it was an intense and special time. And
Right.
there was this little blue table where we would meet. No one could really sleep regular hours. And so there'd always be, I have a lot of kids, there'd always be somebody having to deal with something at this little table. And we would buy flowers for each other or find flowers for each other, just one flower, just so that there's something nice on the table. And someone bought carnations, which is kind of a pedestrian flower. It was very cheap.
Right.
And to make it special, we put it in blue food coloring, and then just started making fun of our, well, I guess like a carbon footprint of sorts, like the fact that people want to fake beauty. And so that became our violated carnation. It's just like, what is the human, forget carbon footprint, but just fingerprint? Like, what do we do here? We make a big mess, but why? Isn't it always ugly? Is it always bad? What if it's poison and it's good? What if it's a parasite and this is a symbiotic relationship? So that became this ongoing discussion, and it lived for a scary amount of time. You violate one carnation, it becomes your pet.
Right. Fantastic. I don't want to dismantle all of your lyrics, but there is one that I have to touch on, which is in the second song on the album, where you talk about Freddie Mercury and as a goldfish in a toilet. So
well, yeah,
I would be not doing my job if I didn't bring that up.
My drummer, someone just asked this in the studio, said, why do you envision Freddie Mercury as, that's a better picture of you.
Okay.
Why do you envision Freddie Mercury as an amputee goldfish? And I was baffled. I said, well, he was an amputee goldfish. Drummer said, when people find out that you're not a poet, that all of your songs are literally true, you are in so much goddamn trouble. But I had forgotten that the goldfish was named after a dude. He had a perfect handlebar mustache, and a missing fin, and he was beautiful. Like, I'm sure all fish are great, but this was a really beautiful fish. And my kids loved him, and he died in the Bywater in New Orleans the night we were having a party, I guess. And most nights in New Orleans are parties of a sort, but there were enough people drinking that, some people wanted to use the toilet, but nobody could pee on Freddie Mercury, and nobody could flush him either. And so I have a lot of friends who remember that night as the night, like, everybody called it for Freddie Mercury.
Fantastic. Now, do you look at this album as a summer album? I mean, it's called Sun Racket, and Beau Diddley Bridge, the song, kind of reminded me, had some summery kind of things to it, and
yeah, it really is, isn't it? Isn't that funny how records are seasons?
Yes.
Yeah, I always wanted a summer record. I have a lot of records that make people cry and shit, and I wanted them to want to go to the beach.
Right. Well,
and this was made, half of it was made in California and half of it was made here on the island, but it's two beaches, and a lot of it was written in New Orleans, very watery too.
Right.
But to be fair, as organic a process as music is, and how the song is an analog for a body that either wants to live or should never have been asked to try, the analogy falls down when you get to the record, which is you know, the industry is not that old.
Right.
Record is a false concept. We just like them because we press them out of wax, and
Exactly.
we're engaged by the process, and we're still into that. And fair enough, but I can't say that records truly come with titles. They're just groupings of songs, and so there's always this struggle to try to be authentic and not manipulative and substantive, you know. And
Although
I
having
don't
said
know
that,
how
I
to
believe I believe this album is being pressed on purple vinyl. Am I correct?
I believe so.
I saw a
Yeah,
picture of it. It looks awesome.
it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But Dave, my drummer, we were just in the control room, kind of watching the speakers the way you do, listening to Beau Diddley Bridge, and he whipped his head around at one point and said, "What did you just say?" And I said, "Sun Racket." He's like, "What?" I said, "Sun Racket." He said, "Is that an album title?" I said, "Yes." And we high-fived each other. It's like,
Very cool.
then you're like, "Oh, good. I don't have to fake anything else."
So where is this Beau Diddley Bridge? I want to go there.
It's here on the island. It's at the tip of the island. It was right around the corner from this, I guess it's a house where I raised my kids, kind of. We moved all over the place and toured all over the place, but this was the longest running house they ever lived in. And it was after we'd been homeless. So it was like the last zero down mortgage in America. Some mob guy got it.
Oh
for
boy.
It's not really a house per se. It's like I don't know, like a boat that washed ashore. And we found out years into raising our kids that our friends all called it the crap shack. We heard them refer to it and said, "What? You mean our house?" But the crap shack is beloved, and lots of bands and writers have stayed there. And it almost died during the last hurricane. The boats were washing up and into it, and we have a lot of affection for it. It's where my little boy would go fishing. It was Beau Diddley Bridge, and it's what you drive under to get to the crap shack.
Yeah.
And when our lives collapsed, the bridge collapsed, and it was very dramatic. And we couldn't escape the hurricane. They shut down the highway after the National Guard said, like, just give us 20 minutes for a down power line, and then you can go to your safe house. And 20 minutes later, there were no roads.
Man.
But our safe houses, to be fair, they got crushed and stuff, and we were okay. But my little boy was definitely, you know, my youngest. His name is Beau, and Beau would fish under Beau Diddley Bridge. And when it collapsed, it just felt like his childhood had collapsed because our lives had too. But it was just rebuilt, so, you know, like Beau Diddley Bridge is back, and Beau's back too.
Excellent. And how much did you have to restrain yourself to throw in a Beau Diddley beat into that?
You know, it did not occur to me. I am so just stupid. I didn't. People kept thinking it was about a bridge in a Beau Diddley song, and that never occurred to me either.
Right.
It's like, oh, bridge, got it.
Ah. Now I'm assuming that most of the guitar playing I hear on the record is you, correct?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering what your relationship is with your guitar playing these days. Does it change over the years? Because I mean, it sounds like you're really enjoying digging in there and making a big noise.
Yeah, I always did. You know, this is part of my dorky thing, is that I was working on guitar when other people were working on showmanship. And it doesn't look like I'm doing anything on stage because I focus. And because I am more interested in the guitar than the audience, I suppose. And I know that's rude, but I figure that's my value proposition. Other people do different things. But yeah, I finally am old enough to not let people push me around. And so I do whatever I want, and that's usually just guitar. But if you're female, they assume that you are about singing. Yeah. Which I mean, you're allowed to play things like concert violin or piano, right? But not electric guitar. Right. So I still, like, I get in a cab with a guitar and they say, "Oh, you're a musician? What do? Just sing?" Why would I lug this thing around? as a singer. But it said, if you Googled me for many years, you know, I was playing all the instruments on all my records, and it would say singing right next to my face. And a journalist finally got mad and said, you know, call them on this. It doesn't say, I don't know who did, but it doesn't say that anymore. I don't know what it says. Maybe singer songwriter or something, but it certainly doesn't imply that I know how to play guitar. And my kids just found something that named me this is some list where I was named 4th best female guitar player of all time, I think. Something that means like universe. It's like, time, you can't take time. Time's not yours to make a list about. But all my kids are like, number 4. You can see them telling their friends.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's got to be weird to be put in a list like that and see how you're perceived by people in terms of something that really doesn't probably make much sense to you. So
yeah, I mean, I think it was more the idea of it than the actual.
Yeah.
There are a lot of some really cool, you know, guitar players, but they're also just chicks that sell records who dressed up. And if it doesn't look like they're Taylor Swift, then they assume it must be art, and it isn't really. There's all kinds of bimbos. It's just
that's true.
It's just a different, you know, you put fashion first, you're not putting music anywhere. Sorry, but it's usually the case.
So speaking of guitar, I was hoping to talk about this track called Frosting. Because it gets pretty noisy and it builds up, and it also seems to have possibly some kind of, the lyrics are addressing mental health. Am I correct in assuming that?
Oh, one does, doesn't it? Yeah. That song kept me up nights. I felt like I had let it down in the studio because my overdubs were responding to an imagined, I want to say, drum effect. Like I thought Dave was going to pull a different groove out of it. Instead, he stayed on top of the beat to make it drive instead of swing. And so none of my overdubs quite made sense. And I felt like I had just let it down, and I didn't know how to make the band, give the band the oomph that it needed without bringing down the vocals. So I just dropped the vocals all the way down, which means it's like kind of repetitive chord progression and no real face, no personality to follow for the listener. So I would just lie awake at night wondering what I should have done. And, you know, Fred would be going like, it's all on the record already. Can you just let it go? It's like, no, I'm going to fix it. So I went back into the studio for no reason. And for about 3 or 4 days, I just brought Frosting back to life. And I pulled the drums back behind the beat, and I front loaded the overdubs and the any feedback and drums, anything to carry it through and past that sort of on top of the beat feel, and brought the vocals back up with dried them completely up so that there's only texture. So there's a personality you can be in the narrative. And I loved this new mix, and I sent it to Fire. I told you the record's done, right?
Yeah.
And they said, well, let's make this the single, and it will be what's on all the streaming services. So it's essentially what everyone's going to hear. I think I wept. I saved this song, and there is now a reason for it. Now people are going to hear the way it should be. But when it comes to lyrics, I'm not always talking to other people. I'm not always talking to myself, and I'm not always talking. Sometimes the song will take something that someone else said. Sometimes I'm talking to someone who isn't even there, who's across the country from me, you know, and this line is because my heart was just broken for somebody who had suffered what I had suffered, where you feel what is here, and they call that crazy, and they drug you into oblivion. And I have no complaints because of the kindness that's embedded in our healthcare system. They're saying, you hurt, let's fix it. But I think the human experience is to engage, and there is a lot that will buffet us. Nothing worked. If their drugs worked, I'd be cool with it.
Right.
But they make a lot of people really sick and psychologically ill as well. And when I realized I was talking to this person that I cared so much about, I was also talking to me, which is kind of what songs do. If you got to learn something, they'll make you comfortable spitting it out.
Yeah. Well, from talking to you, I get the feeling that you have a very special relationship with your songs that is not the same as like a lot of people that I talk to have.
Yeah.
How would you describe that?
It has changed. When I was 14, I suppose I was like everybody else. I was writing songs that were influenced by other musicians. I had cracked the code, and it was an engaging hobby. Right. And then I was hit by a car when I was 16. And in the hospital, I started hearing noises and sounds that I realized other people weren't hearing. And I turned those into songs, and some of those noises would become voices, and those syllables would become words. And that's what Throwing Muses songs were. So I felt like they were gods, and I couldn't touch them, and they were hard to live with. I felt like they were making my life live stories so that they could be written. And I'm this dumb little girl. Nobody wants to listen to me. I want to listen to me. And I just thought, that's it. They win. You know, they should have chosen somebody else, and they killed me. I'm out of here. And I almost was. Then I got pregnant. And from then on, you realize, well, you're not the story at all. You're not here to be okay even. You're here just to give. Always give. And from then on, it's been about being empty enough for the songs to talk. Right. And then I was treated for PTSD, which was unrelated. It was from when my oldest son was kidnapped at age 3 by his father. And when I was treated with, do you know what EMDR is?
I don't think so.
Eye movement desensitization.
Okay.
R. I don't know what the R is anymore, but there is a light bar that you follow with your eyes, you hold pulsing electrodes, and you live the trauma that's causing your PTSD. It has cured veterans with shell shock in a few hours. Really? Wow. Because this was about a child, it took me months and months, and it was brutal. It's like psychological but systemic chemo. It's everything your system is engaged in keeping out of itself. Again, like with contagions and naming them, and this is the same sort of situation where as a host I had to be strong for someone else. And when I went through this process, which did cure the PTSD, it revealed an alternate personality, because I had been dissociating all these years. Whenever I played music, writing it, recording it, playing live, I was dissociating, and I was exhibiting classic symptoms of dissociation. I wasn't blinking, my eyes were glassy, I had no memory of any of this. And there were doctor friends at my shows that, when I learned this about myself, said, I'm so sorry. It was just classic switching, and I didn't recognize it. I just thought you were an artist. And I'm wondering now if those two are mutually exclusive, because this is not a mental illness. It's a coping mechanism. It can happen to anyone. Right. And now I am fully present for the writing, the playing. I thought I wouldn't be able to play anymore, but they made me go on a promo tour for the Muses record, Purgatory Paradise. And I was at the BBC. This woman knew my story. I don't think I talked about it on the radio, but she asked me to pick up my guitar and play Sunray Venus, the single from Purgatory Paradise. And I looked at her like, I can't play anymore. And she just stared at me like, try. This is on the air on
oh my God.
BBC. And so whoever was with me just handed me my guitar, looking as terrified as I was.
Yeah.
And I started, and I knew the chords and I knew the words and I knew what it was about. And I was watching my hands for the first time in my life. I had always just stared into space while my hands just flew around. And I watched what they were doing, and I knew what my mouth was talking about. And it wasn't evil, and it wasn't even bigger than me. So the fully present thing is both smaller and more engaging, really. It's just that my relationship to songs is not, well, it's fluid.
Yeah. Okay.
There's no stasis that I have achieved with these things.
Well, that wasn't the answer I was expecting.
No, so I probably have an easier one.
That's all right. Woo. Okay, so the album is out on the 4th of September, I believe, and we're in a state of who knows what. Have you got any ideas of what you're planning on doing after the record comes out, or have you been working on other music in the meantime? What's going on?
50 Foot Wave is in the studio right now.
Okay.
We're putting drums down on one coast and overdubs on the other.
Yeah.
And I'm starting a solo record. I'm also in the final edit of my new book. And that's the most time consuming. I get up at 3 a.m. to work on.
Is it a memoir?
It is. It's all memoir because I don't know how to make stuff up. So I tell the truth, and I tell the truth that I know is true because I was looking at it.
Yeah.
And in this case, they wanted a book about raising kids on a tour bus, which sounds like a good idea. And I ended up saying, well, you've met kids and you've been on buses, right? It's great, but it's not interesting.
Right.
And then
you just call it, Are We There Yet?
Well, if you're given the opportunity to edit 30 years of your life, you can make it sound pretty damn exciting.
Sure. Yeah.
I just took out all the boring stuff and ended up with this book that's breathless. Like, I don't think it's even comfortable. I downplayed the drama, and it's still, the editor's response was, "This is the strangest book I've ever read." Like, dude, it's my life. I unweirded it for you. He said, "This is my point." But it's in that stage where you realize, oh, it has to be published. I can't just love it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I'm so shy, and the truth is just hard. You got to dig for the real truth.
Well, the truth is something that we need more of these days because...
I suppose so, yeah. It just, for shy people, it's hard to tell all the truths.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And some people have no problem not telling any truth at all or making up their own. So there you go.
Yeah. And some people just sort of puke all over you with it. But I don't know, there's a sweet spot there where you hope someone can find the idiosyncratic and universal that they can then take in, and
right.
It would speak for them, not just to them.
Right. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap things up because I've got my Saturdays ahead of me here. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. It's been amazing and fascinating as always. I hope the record does really well. I'm going to order a purple copy of it right now.
Thank you, sweetheart. I wish I had one to send you. I don't even have, I think I got a couple vinyl mixes and that's it. When I want to hear it, I have to go to Spotify.
And hopefully you can come down and play for us again. I remember the last time you were here, it was an amazing show, just a solo show of yours. It was great. So.
It's my favorite place in the whole world.
You say that to everybody.
I actually don't. You can ask them. I say you're my favorite place in the world.
Very good. Well, good luck with everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
We'll see you again soon.
Lovely speaking with you. Take care.